Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our December Sister Reach monthly social justice preacher series. I'm Elise Salisbury, and Sister Reach is a grassroots 501c3 nonprofit organization founded by Cherisse Scott in 2011 in Memphis, Tennessee. Sister Reach supports the reproductive autonomy of women and teens of color, poor and rural women, LGBTQIA+ people, and our families through the framework of reproductive justice. Sister Reach's mission is to empower our base to lead healthy lives, raise healthy families, and live in healthy and sustainable communities. This is achieved through working by a four-pronged strategy: education, policy and advocacy, cultural shift, and harm reduction, locally, nationally, and internationally. Recognizing how a woman's life can positively change when she's empowered with access and information about her reproductive and sexual health, Cherisse Scott began advocating for reproductive and sexual health and justice in 2005. In 2011, she relocated from Chicago, Illinois to Memphis, Tennessee, and founded Sister Reach on October the 19th at the request of her dearly departed mother, Pearl Williams. With the visionary support of her mother and grandmother, the work of Sister Reach now reaches statewide, regionally, nationally, and internationally. Cherisse is a highly sought out public speaker on reproductive justice and human rights issues. She diligently works with state and national partners to bring awareness and connect the intersections of human rights and justices experienced by Tennesseans and vulnerable people across the United States and the world. She's a preacher, an actress, an activist, a musician, and extends her work into reproductive justice as a consultant also. Please help me welcome Reverend Cherisse Scott, our December Social Justice Preacher Series Preacher of the Hour.
Hey, everybody. Good to be on the call and glad to be here. And I also want to introduce everyone to one of the newest additions on our staff, our Director of Education and Outreach, Dr. Sylvia Rue. And Dr. Rue, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to folks who are going to be viewing and share what brings you to this new work here in Tennessee on reproductive justice before we kind of jump into our conversation together.
Okay, thank you. I was compelled to work for reproductive justice because it's so important, especially these days. I have a long history in the field of reproductive justice, human sexuality. I have a doctorate in human sexuality. I'm a filmmaker, award-winning documentary filmmaker, and I'm a writer, published writer, and licensed clinical social worker in the past, and an extensive history of activism. I was the California state leader on marriage in California, and I've been on the board of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. I'm a religious scholar, director of religious affairs for the National Black Justice Coalition, and I'm really glad to be here. I've moved to Memphis, been here 7 days. The tornado and I shook hands, and that was interesting. And I'm just very glad to be here and working on this high calling.
Very good. And we're so glad to have you, and just so glad to add all of your amazing expertise, experience, and history in this work in the movement. So I don't necessarily have a topic today, but as I did last year, I wanted to just kind of look through and talk through some of what we have experienced over these last 12 months, of which all three of us have had an opportunity to add our voices, our understandings, and our recommendations on the ways that we think through these intersections of faith, religion, reproductive justice, and human rights more broadly. So I've got a cheat sheet here with my notes. And so we started off this year with one of our former board of directors of Sister Reach, Reverend Dr. Geraldine Major, where she talked about displaced belief equaling defeat, definitely thinking about defeatist attitudes and the ways that informs the way that we fight for ourselves, fight for our communities, fight for humankind. And then we moved into Reverend Lewis Mitchell talking about religious liberties and white supremacy. We love talking about white supremacy at the intersection of religion here at Sister Reach. We do so much work around that piece. We'll talk more about that shortly. And then Reverend Cherisse Salisbury talked about resilient women, the leadership and power of women in the Bible, lifting up some important stories about women, many that have been overlooked when we're thinking, in our daily Bible studies for those of us who are Bible believers and followers, and those who have tried to increase our understanding, knowledge, and education on biblical text. And so lifting that piece up, I thought was really instrumental in just, shifting the narratives around, especially thinking about this more Christian understanding that has unfortunately been deeply centered in misogynistic ways, thoughts, and practices, is that women were invisible and did not contribute anything to this kind of greater understanding of how we arrive here. But that is untrue. And then I followed that up in April, talking about theological fascism and its impact on sexual and reproductive health access, which continues to be a formulating analysis and understanding that as I continue my own personal study and life as a believer in the, at the intersection of the work that we're doing here at Sister Reach, to lift up these kind of hypocritical points of view that the conservative religious right continues to move forward as if it is something that we can point to in biblical text. And when the reality is that all of the oppressive ways that we've seen folks who claim to be believers of Jesus versus the ways that they, how that plays out in how they craft policy, how they hinder people's access to social services, how we are involved in war, how we are handling immigrants, how we are handling women, how we are handling queer identified people, and so on and so forth, is so antithetical to the ministry of Jesus that, however, being positioned as holiness or the holy way or the right way or the quote unquote moral way. We hate that word here, especially Reverend Elise hates that word, but that is the way that public policy is being informed as a tool of not only white supremacy, but theological fascism altogether. And then we had Minister Tamika Greer, who I think now is Reverend Tamika Greer because she's recently ordained, around righteous relationships and talking about experiencing healthy relationships. And so she came from a dynamic on several types of relationships, from one another to our relationship with the divine. So then we moved into Reverend Courtney Pace, lifting up Prathia Hall's work and how it was parallel to reproductive justice. I would go as far as to say it is reproductive justice, but because it's Prathia Hall. But okay, we'll keep going there. But Reverend Pace absolutely lifted up some amazing points for us to be thinking about. All of these videos I'm lifting up right now are on our Facebook page, our Sister Reach Facebook page, in the video section. You can definitely, in your own time, in your leisure over the holidays, feel free to check them out. We allow them to live on the Facebook page, and they'll be there for any type of reference that you would like to go back and check that out on your own. And then one of my favorite clergy persons here in the city, Reverend John Gilmore, one of our former board members for Sister Reach as well, talked about Make Me Want to Holler, and spoke about the turmoil in the world and being empowered to address those many different types of oppressions and turmoils that harm us. Pastor Candace Hardnett expanded the conversation around healthy relationships and included low self-esteem and even just more kind of mind, body, spirit around those issues. Then Dr. Rue comes in later in September and talked about holiness and sexual health education and how we need our churches involved. And so one of the things that I do want to say in this broadcast is that Reverend Elise is going to be doing some other work within the organization, and Dr. Rue is going to be taking on leading the Social Justice Preacher Series for 2022. So you all be sweet to her and kind to her, and love on her as she facilitates this very sacred and necessary human rights centered space. And you'll definitely hear more from her around sexual health education. And I look forward to seeing how she continues to work not only through her own leadership, but with our education and outreach team. Then in October, we had Apostle Tiffany Adams talking about balancing the mind, body, and spirit through mindful meditation and ridding ourselves of toxicity from our past to live balanced and healthy lives. I think that that message was very timely as we continue to navigate this pandemic, this epidemic, this endemic, all the demics that we continue to navigate, as so many of us have been harmed in ways that I don't think that we're even going to fully understand. It might even be PTSD in how we are moving through our daily lives, trying to take into consideration the way that COVID-19 has impacted us for those of us who have contracted the virus, or how we've been harmed through our grief from losing folks to the virus, or the fact that people are, have chosen we all have to live in a different way, a way that none of us have had to necessarily live during our lifetime, because we haven't had something, definitely not in my lifetime, something this heavy with this much gravity around illness and the ways that we are all, folks are contracting COVID-19, and now we got all of these many different variants. It's Omicron now is the one. We had the Delta variant before that. Every time we think that we're kind of getting this under control, a new variant occurs, and so then we're all kind of trying to figure out how to navigate it again and again and again. So I appreciated that she was able to offer some what we call in the reproductive justice world self-help practices and ideas, and considering how we move forward of not only dealing with our past, but how that also impacts our current lives, our daily lives, tools and strategies that we can use to move our lives forward. And then last month, wow, Reverend Naomi Washington Leapart talked about the kids ain't all right, interrupting child abuse done in God's name. A very brave, I must say, a very brave social justice preacher series thus far. I will say probably one of the bravest ones, because she used her own lived experience to tell the story about how many of us who have been harmed through sexual violence in our childhood, how some of that sexual violence has happened right in our sacred spaces, right under our parents' noses, right under their household noses, but in our churches, our synagogues, our places of worship, that these types of issues have occurred, and like what it has meant to have to deal with that as her own self. I definitely have my own stories as well. And so now we get to December, and my kind of task today is to just talk about, where do we go from here? We've heard so much. We've been doing this preacher series now for about 3 or 4 years now. We've had dozens of clergy from around this beautiful country share their understandings, their points of view, from their theological training or their advocacy training, or the combination thereof. And so, Elisa and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and it was like, wow, we've covered so much. But when we think about what's next, right, as we go into 2022, for many of our states, we are heading into election seasons for the senators of our states, the mayors, some gubernatorial elections are occurring, and we're getting closer and closer to another presidential campaign. And and for us, though this preacher series is a religious and faith-centered kind of space, has always been designed to highlight this particular vantage point, or the vantage, or to think about policy, think about legislation, and how it has impacted so many of our lives through this kind of religious lens, from that particular vantage point. But not just any religious lens, but a very human rights centered. I dare to say progressive, because some folks that say progressive aren't necessarily doing progressive work, but I'm going to say human rights centered, a human rights centered lens in how we think about engaging membership, other clergy, seminarians, religious scholars, ethicists, how that the bridges to some of these more secular spaces in our world, whether we're talking about in the doctor's office, what's happening on the institutional level of hospitals and insurance providers, what's happening in the White House. So we, Sister Reach has been super engaged, very intentionally and strategically engaged in work that centers around religious freedom or religious liberty, the Religious Restoration Act, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and what that means for what's going, what we can at least perceive to what could potentially happen ahead. I think for me, just to kind of get the conversation going, I think for me, one of the things that I'm very concerned with is blind trust. Blind trust of our clergy, blind trust of those of us who happen to have religious leadership that is also political leadership, and where we hold those folks accountable versus the culture of lack of accountability that we see happening kind of on a day-to-day basis in our churches. I think that, my church experience, and I've been in church a long time, and active in ministry for quite some time. And then I had to take a full step back, really for healing, for restoration, for a reset after, you evolve and you learn more. And that's not necessarily what you're seeing being reflected on a day-to-day basis or a Sunday-to-Sunday basis or community basis of how your church is engaging, or, just what it means to be in ministry and I'm talking about behind the scenes ministry, not necessarily what the people see with a smile and some worship songs and the organ or whatever it is, however your worship experience operates where you are. I think that, there's something to be said about the complicit nature of harm that many of our religious leaders, we could be talking about the Sunday school leader, we could talk about the pastor, the youth leader, I don't really care, the bishop, the apostle, whomever it is, and their relation to harmful political candidates and elected officials, and or are those harmful candidates or elected officials. And so I think, that's kind of where I want to begin right there, that we've got some heavy duty work around accountability to do in our churches. And I think that those of us, folks who go to church are the same folks that vote. Folks that go to church are also folks that are living with HIV. They are also victims of sexual assault. Some have had to sell their bodies to live, and therefore that means that they at one point were a sex worker, if not currently sex workers. I mean, all the intersections that we work on behalf of here at Sister Reach, people who sit in the pews are also reflected in the folks that we are serving in our communities. We're not just giving gift cards to strangers from who have no relationship to the divine. We're giving gift cards. Our COVID-19 funding has supported people who sit in your pews and pay tithes and offering, right? We're not just, as we fight for abortion access for folks who need that access, we're not doing that separate from the folks who sit in pews. Like I said, I've been in church a long time, but I've also had an abortion in my life, so, we're not talking about strangers, and I'm not an anomaly. We're not talking about people, faceless people. We're talking about the same people who pay tithes, who pay offering, who come to Bible study, who are there at church on Saturday or Sunday, or whenever they worship, if they're burning sage, if they're slinging oil, if they're burning incense, it's whatever, right? We are talking about the same people, and these people in this greater beloved community don't have the necessary basic supports to live, right? And in many instances, the way that they engage in their politics and how they are civically engaged overall is informed by their church leaders. You know, my pastor happens to be super engaged and fights white supremacy at every turn, but that's who she is, and that's how she runs her church. But that's just not the norm, right? And especially for the South, right? The fact that I have a pastor who is also a woman, cisgendered woman, Black woman. I mean, it's not unheard of, but doing what she does in ways that she does it is, you know, she's in the smaller group of folks who are either empowered or don't have those levels of barriers to make those types of, you know, to use her leadership or leverage her leadership or her or even her national presence to kind of be this build, you know, this bridge of information exchange. She's super engaged in not only what's going on the level of kind of the faith community level, but beyond, right? So what are you all thinking about this kind of interesting complicit nature? Is that something that you're thinking is happening in more churches than others? I mean, you know, at least you started a church last year because of some of these issues. Like, what is it that you're seeing? And I mean, you know, does any of what I'm saying around this level of harm resonate with you or you, Doc?
I'd say for me, absolutely. I'd say for me, and even starting a church, like that was very challenging, right? Even, you know, going on the federal level with, you know, becoming an organization, that process was very challenging because you had to put yourself in certain boxes, right? In order to be an organization, right? So that was one of the things, but I know many of our politicians or elected officials help inform of these things, whether it's on a federal level or a state level, because even a state level was a little bit challenging for me. Having to navigate a state that has tried to create policies and that has created a policy specifically recently within the past couple of years around that was anti-LGBT centered around clergy, right? And so having to navigate that and finding actually really finding the loopholes in it is what I had to do. It took me a long time to do it. I got it done. And I want to echo something that you said. I had no idea until I really started becoming engaged and reading about and, you know, becoming more informed of politics, right? I had no idea that many of the clergy here in our state, here in Tennessee, were conservatives, right? Where elected officials are conservatives. And so these are the people who are driving how we live, you know, every day, how, you know, the access we have to healthcare, the access we have to the ability to get married, right? So yes, absolutely. I have experienced and am experiencing difficulties as it relates to starting Agape and really trying to do ministry in a way where it reaches the marginalized community or communities of people that it was created for, that it was ordained for. So yes, you know, dealing with that, having to jump through hoops just to do something that most other people, not all other people, but most other people can fill out a form and pay the fee and move on to something else. You know, having to find a way to do ministry here in the state of Tennessee through the loopholes that were created of, you know, the barriers that were created for LGBT folks. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things, just one of the things that I've experienced here in the state with the policies and the folks who are in place that informs those things.
Yeah. What about you, Doc?
Well, because the sound's going in and out.
Yeah, I'm on my phone at the same time because I just want to make sure my sound is consistent.
I was saying, what did you want me to address? Because the sound. was inconsistent? When
Oh,
in and out?
coming out to you. Just thinking about the very interesting nature of I'm just going to say the church overall, the Christian church overall,
Mhm.
and its complicit nature with what we're seeing as oppression, right? As harm that is happening in our communities, that is being led by either elected officials who happen to be conservative clergy,
Right.
conservative Christian, and
Yes.
or what it looks like for these conservative bodies to partner with, support, these same types of like conservative politicians to continue and further white supremacy, systemic
Yeah.
oppression, harm against folks that, unfortunately is also impacting the people who are in their pews, not just some random quote unquote worldly faceless, nameless person, but it's hurting, even folks in our various churches. Just wanted to get some of your thoughts on that.
Well, I've been dealing with the politicians and the preachers for years, and they are complicit in oppression. Let's take AIDS, HIV. I've said that the church has AIDS, which means absolutely ignorant about the divinity of sex. AIDS, And when I've talked to these preachers, they they just the knowledge about human sexuality is so limited, and that they want to make laws about it with their limitations. And so you have to teach them, you have to bring them along, you have to talk to them, you have to make friends with them, and you have to do, but it's tough because I'm dealing like one minute, when you explain certain things, they come up to you and ask questions where they really just didn't get it. And it's, to me, so simple. Or when they actually are complicit, they identify with the authoritarianism of the church, the patriarchy of the church, and they don't want to give that up because it's power. So we're dealing with a lot. We're dealing with their own identification with what they see. It's what, like one minister said to me, he's never lost a theological argument and he's never won a theological argument, because there's so many ways to interpret different texts. That's why we have, most people don't know, Christianity has, I think, at least 38,000 different denominations and sects. Each one believes different things. So how are you going to win that argument? I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. I'll never win an argument with a staunch Catholic.
Yeah.
And that Catholic won't win an argument with me. So then you have to go beyond argument and talk about common ground. Where do we come together? Most people come together on certain things, like it is wrong to harm a child. It is wrong to be sexually aggressive and assaulted. There's certain basic wrongs that we probably can all agree on. But when we get into the other things of, I want my law to control your life and your body, that's it's really hard. It's hard to deal with those kind of things because they feel they are coming from a position of their moral stance. But if your moral stance hurts my being, my body, my soul, then we have to come and reason together again.
And I think something that kind of raises up to the top for me and what you're saying about like this common ground and understanding, and then in comes race, class, and respectability politics, right? That, I believe that everybody's supposed to eat. I just don't think you're supposed to have lobster and steak. I think that if you're on food stamps, you need to eat canned goods and be all right with that because you're poor. And why would you want to have, you don't need access to the foods that I have access to because you can't afford those foods, right? Or, Jesus is just going to always have to be a white man with long blonde hair and a beard, and never, any representation that looks like me or you, or some other person of color, or Jesus has to be straight and never can embody and or have empathy or sympathy or understanding for someone who is not straight, So I think that, this kind of very interesting. And I think the first time I ever heard the phrase respectability politics, I was on a panel at Lamont on College, and Reverend Dr. Earl Fisher was leading the discussion. I had never heard that before. And instead of just saying to him, I don't think I know what you mean, could you define it? Right. I think I was like, no, that's not the issue. And somebody else was like, what? And then, and so I think, for the sake of this conversation and for others who may have been like me back in the day, when I think about respectability politics, I think about high-minded folks who act quote unquote bougie, folks who are high-minded, who have access, rich folks who many times are, what's the word? I don't have it, so I always use a different one. But who are elitist acting, right? As if just because they're a particular race or come from a particular pedigree, have a particular access to education, that all automatically that's supposed to put them in this different kind of class of people. I mean, some of the poorest acting people, and I mean poor in attitude, poor in character, poor in bedside manner, were people who had all of these things. And some of the nicest people that I've ever met, kindest people, were people, who may have had a different type of accent, split all types of verbs, maybe can't say the key. They are loving thing who care about the lives of other people, right? So so even in that, right, I think that we're also dealing with and especially thinking about something that you said, Elise, is that, you didn't even realize, quote unquote, that folks were, conservative, or what that was supposed to mean, going to church, the type of churches that you've gone to, and we've gone to very similar churches in our lives. We just thought it was holiness. There's a way you're supposed to operate with holy living. And then everything else is quote unquote worldly living, right? And if you were being quote unquote worldly, then there was a set of, you should expect a particular outcome based on that. If you're in the club, if you're in the tavern, if you're drinking, smoking, and having sex, then the way that we were taught is that was supposed to then invite what people can, that because it was supposedly sin, it was supposed to invite a particular thing. For some who think that way, it was HIV. For some who think that way, it's any manner of, it was getting evicted, losing your man, children becoming wayward, whatever, versus the systems that control or inform an environment in which people are expected to navigate, that many times most folks can't navigate, not because they don't want better, or not because they don't, want to live in abundance, but because they absolutely have been stopped or limited from being able to access that abundance. So I appreciate that common ground piece, Doc, because I think for me, that helps me to kind of think about even more so, of this, where do we go from here? We are going to have to figure out what our common ground looks like. And I think that the common ground piece for me begins in the fact that everybody deserves access to abundance, right? And anybody or anything or any system or any political party that hinders people from experiencing that are not only anti-me, they're anti-love, they're anti-divine, and that in whatever, and that has to be something that our current administration through the Biden administration is paying attention to. It needs to be something that we are also bringing into our pulpits to talk about, and have conversations about, like, how are we treating each other? Was it really okay, to leave babies in cages while you fight for babies in the womb. I mean, like, you make a choice. What choice? What is this? It can't be a both and, that you get to inflict harm while you try to call out what you think is harmful, right? You don't get to inflict this. So, when I think about where do we go from here, I'm thinking about what is the call to action for not only the believer, but the non-believer, right? The human being. What is the call to action for the human being? And for me, that call to action begins with how I treat my neighbor, whomever my neighbor is indicative of how I believe, it should be equal to how I believe I should be treated. If I treat my neighbor poorly, I don't know why would we expect better treatment if we're not treating our neighbor with love and dignity and kindness and respect. Some people call me a pushover because I care for folks who don't care for me. I fight for folks who don't fight for me. I'm loyal to people who are not loyal to me, right? Not because it's not about them. For me, it's about me, right? And it's about how I choose to live my life, how I choose to forward justice for people, how I choose to embody what it is that I want to see in the world. I want to see more me's in the world, so that's how what are some things that you all think need to be a part of this common ground understanding?
I'd say for me, it would be exactly what you said. Until we really honor our neighbor and love our neighbor, it's, until we get to that point in terms of what Dr. Rue was saying about common ground, we have to agree that everyone, regardless of who they are, deserves access, right? Access to healthcare, access to human rights, access to the ability to marry, access to pastor a church, regardless of who they are and the denomination they are. Like, we have to reach the common ground, which is loving your neighbor as yourself. And until we're able to do that, right, it's going to be difficult to move forward and agree on anything that requires abundance for everyone, which is why I think we're at a stalemate, right? The other thing is, I was reading this post earlier that really kind of took me, really kind of grabbed at my heart, right? So there was a clergy person, a cisgender Black woman, who was saying, who made a statement and said that had she been allowed to preach, right, or answer the call, when she acknowledged her call to her leaders, she would have several more years of ministry under her belt, right? So even agreeing that we're equal, right, in the kingdom for those who believe, right? But, allowing women and LGBT folks access to the ability to lead, because we have to lead in many parts of this. We have to lead together. But again, until we come to the common ground, I love that word, Dr. Rue, of understanding that we're all human, that we, that none of us, no one person, no gender is above the next, right? No orientation is above the next, and that we're all here trying to live and support and breathe. And you would think in this moment, if there was ever a time that we would reach common ground, you would think the number of deaths that we have experienced among, in the world, you would think this would be the moment that we would come to a common ground where, if there was never a time that we would love, that we would understand the urgency of the hour as it relates to loving one another, loving our neighbor, right, as ourselves. We'll understand in the moment where our hospitals are at capacity and our doctors and nurses are tired, right? We would know and understand the how critical it is that everybody deserves access, equal access to healthcare, right? Everybody deserves it, but it bewilders me that we're living in the moment where we're seeing death at the rate that we're seeing, where we're seeing communities be gentrified at the rate that we're seeing them. I'm wondering, okay, we're in this moment and we haven't reached common ground, but where is the crying aloud and sparing not to that, right? To the things to the things around homelessness, or where's the crying aloud and sparing not to all of the issues, right, for marginalized people that folks face every day. Some apartments here, there are folks that are on the brink of being put out of their apartments. Where is the church? And these are people of color, these are Black people that are being put out. Where is the Black church? Right? And people like to say that it's not a race thing, but it is the Black church that has always guided the politics, right? Or what we would unite together and fight for and advocate for. It was a church that was behind Dr. King, right? So, everybody wasn't with them, but overall, it was the church that influenced the community. Right? So that's the other thing that I would say. Moving forward, it looks like to me, justice that's going to have to happen, as we all come to the understanding and the knowledge of that every human being matter. Trans women matter, right? Trans men matter. Gender nonconforming people matter, whether you understand it or not, right? I don't think any community is asking people to absolutely understand our oppression, right? We're asking you to honor our humanity, and there's a difference in the two. So moving forward looks like love. It looks like loving your neighbor. It looks like honoring me as a human being, honoring me as a Black woman who every time my son walks out the door, I literally pray every footstep he takes towards his car, hoping that he doesn't, become another statistic in the city of Memphis, where the crime is through the roof, everything else is through the roof, homelessness is through the roof. And, even the mayor here is talking about a Ferris wheel. You know what I'm saying? Like, hear us screaming, right? Hear us screaming, not for another decoration in the city that doesn't answer the poverty, that doesn't answer the unhomed, that doesn't, hear us screaming in this city, right? If you start anywhere, start in your own home. So hear us. So where do we go from here? Yes, the people being heard, the desires of the people, the needs of the people being heard, and not the wants of the elected officials, and not the greed that we've seen through our elected officials, not the pump and circumstance that we've seen in our elected officials. And one more thing, I saw a person who was running, right? Many people who become the faces of certain things. So they become the faces of certain things. And so I keep looking at this ad that goes up my timeline for, a certain person who's running for office who happens to be a white male. Well, it has a little Black girl, right, on this advertisement. But we need our elected officials and those who are running to not at all, right, continue to tokenize Black people to get in that seat. We need you to be who you are. If that's you, be that before you run for office. So, just kind of trying to reach a common ground of understanding that even that little Black girl on the picture has a lived experience that a photo op, right, cannot provide. And so, yes, love thy neighbor, honoring the humanity of every individual. And that's what I think we have to do as the groundwork of where do we go from here, recognizing and honoring the humanity of each other.
Also,
Go ahead, Doc.
Another common ground point that people, I think, could relate to around the world is the golden rule, because every religious system has its own statement of a golden rule, doing unto others. And what we have to know, and that helps us understand, that the term justice shouldn't be separated to It doesn't mean just us. Justice, not just us. We're not just us who get the rights, not just us who get the wealth, not just us who have the food and the health and the material things and the access to clean water. It should be for everyone.
Absolutely. And we, the golden rule is a part of our kind of where we kind of point back to in our faith and advocacy training as kind of one of the recommendations forward, right? So I love that you brought that up, but I think, that's just not what we're seeing, y'all. It's just not what we're seeing. For those of you who follow some of the work that we're doing on a more day-to-day basis, and especially our national work, I had an opportunity to go and speak at the Supreme Court rally in DC on December 1st. And, I lifted up some things because I think I'm just tired of, 17 years going on 18 years of being in this movement. I think, those who are most disproportionately impacted being folks that look like the people on this Zoom and our brothers, sisters, and folks of color consistently, right, being a part of these talking points. I think it just started to rub me the wrong way. Yeah. When ultimately, one of the things that I lifted up wasn't that, these folks care so much about Black babies in particular, especially since, a Black woman's face is always, even on this elected official you're talking about, this potential candidate, folks know how to use us when they need to try to seem like they care about Black communities, baby. Yes. But when they get in office, and this is even sometimes for the Black folks that get in office, we don't see them anymore.
Right.
We don't see them anymore. We don't see them until it's time again, to campaign. That's one of the reasons I haven't run yet. I don't have the time to build relationships the ways that I would want a relationship built with me if, from an elected official. I want to be able to give the city, the state, my time, for them to see my face, for us, for me to be accessible. I mean, yes, the work that we've done here, this is part of Cherisse's receipts here, but either way, I still think it's imperative, right, for folks not to just see you when you're campaigning, but going back to the, to this opportunity to speak. But one of the things I lifted up was that this, like, even the abortion fight has absolutely nothing to do with us. It has more to do with the fact that white women are not and have not been having children at the same rate of Black and brown women and girls. And because of that, right, that's giving the other side of this conversation of it, the very white, power-hungry, fascist, authoritarian side of this conversation, pause, that they are afraid because, by 2030, demographers are saying that the majority of this population in the United States will be people of color. And, and not all folks are jumping on the bandwagon of this conservative point of view when they're living at these intersections of oppression, beginning with race, beginning with gender, beginning with sexual orientation, beginning with their economic disadvantage. And COVID-19 has only exacerbated this. The fact that these folks have not committed any evangelism to making sure that everybody's eating, what's happening here? Folks are dying because of COVID-19, and these are the same folks that are fighting for us to have to put whether or not we're going to wear a mask. This isn't just coming down from some random, human rights centered people. These are coming down. These, the whole reason that we're all having to revamp our employee handbooks is because you have a powerful few who get to control the destiny and the movement of everybody else, right? Because masks are always going to be required up in here in Sister Reach. We just happen to be in our own, respective offices with the door closed, and we get to be, in that space alone without our masks. But when you're in the common area, I need to be concerned about the other people's lives on this call and the other folks who are in this office. That's just my reasonable service. Like, that's just That's just me caring about your life as much as I care about mine. That's just, taking proper precaution, because I don't know who you were around yesterday, this morning, when you went to lunch or anything. I don't know how what your hygiene practices are, and if you are taking, so I mean, it baffles the mind that for me sometimes, that we have to fight this hard for common sense, for us to care for one another, take care of one another, right? So I mean, I think that my appeal to those who might be teeter a little bit more on the conservative side of this conversation, who may be watching this, because we get people watching from all walks of life and all belief systems, right? Is that, it's time out for that type of ideology, right? And if you claim to love Jesus, and that is the reason that you have the religious path that you have, then it's time to repent. It's time to repent. Because this be not only, and repentance isn't just words, it's action, it's turning away. It's time to turn away from this type of poor behavior of doing harm, right? Instead of doing unto others the way that you would want to be treated. Because see, the reality is that those in power are terrified of if the flip was switched, because you're going to expect us to treat you the way that you have treated us, right? You're going to expect for those who are marginalized, the disenfranchised, the lost and the turned out, to treat you with means and access and money and connections and networks the way that you have treated folks who are trying to put, $7 together to go sleep in a shelter tonight in Memphis, Tennessee. A fee that has been crafted by folk like you, not like us. Let's be clear, because if you're poor, you're poor. What are you getting $7 for? Hey, if you ain't got enough money to pay to eat, if you have, where are you coming up with $7? And then if you're $7, then you're going to be harassed by law enforcement because you're begging for money. So it's so many, so I for those who might be watching this, it's time to repent. It's time to turn away from that type of poor behavior, right? From that type of oppressive behavior, from not giving a damn about your brother or your sister, right? Even if they happen to change their gender identity, for you not caring about that other human being. Right? Like that. I mean, is that not our responsibility? As humankind? Like, it's time to go back to being like on some humankind type thing. It's, for me, it's so much bigger than a party. These political parties are a mess. It's a mess. It's a bunch of mess. Because we got Democrats who vote conservatively as if they were Republicans right here in the state of Tennessee.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And we have Republicans who will try to stop somebody from becoming married to someone of the same gender, but they secretly are living gay. They in the closet, right? Or you got a mistress, or you've had the person that you didn't want to upset your wife to have an abortion, right? Or you've gotten your daughter a secret abortion. Come on, I just think that what is up with this level of, why does it have to be this level of control? Why does it have to be,
absolutely,
this level of harm? I'm just ranting. Y'all jump in. I'm just, it's a lot.
Well, I mean, it's all of what you said. I think, the elected officials who are leading us into further oppression in the name of the Lord, I think those folks, people like to declare, where everybody's going, right? But if you do that, you're on your way to hell. They use this language, and if we read, for those who believe, if we read the same Bible, the first that are going to have to answer aren't the folks who are going to hell, it's the church. Going to have to answer for not standing up for the marginalized, the same way that Jesus did. For those who believe that, they're going to have to answer for being quiet, right? In a moment like the COVID-19, in a moment of homelessness, in a moment of even when women in the church need someone to speak up for them. the church is going to have to answer to God for this moment, right? For racism, for all the things that contribute to further marginalization of already oppressed people. And so again, I brought up the post that I saw earlier today, and the lady was saying that she would have many more years of ministry under her belt had she been allowed to answer the call at that time. And I just wonder, right? It made me wonder, and it made me wonder if she, as well as other women and individuals who were called to ministry in their youth, if they had been allowed to answer the call when they answered the call, right? How much better off would the church be today? How much better off would the world be today? Because if it was a thing, right? If that was a thing, if women and individuals who were called to ministry, including LGBT people, if we were allowed to answer when we were called, wouldn't we be a part of the solution now? Wouldn't the body of Christ be stronger than what it is now? Wouldn't the world be stronger than what it is now? It just made me wonder, like, maybe this is why the church is in the position that is in. Maybe this is why the world is in the position that it is in. And so, yeah, I just believe that we're tired. We're tired, of being oppressed. We're tired of systematic oppression. We're tired of theological oppression, and really people are breaking out and starting their own ministries for these very reasons, to build the world, like you were saying earlier, Cherisse, to build the world, to be the solution and build the world that we want to see, to build the ministries, to do ministry as ministry should be done, not leaving anybody out, right? And so that is again where I think where we're on our way to. We're not just, you have more people that are not afraid anymore. Because I mean, after so long of being oppressed and fearful to speak out and fearful to march or fearful to write op-eds, or after so long of being tired of being quiet, people are bursting, to freedom, the freedom of speaking out. They're bursting through the fear, right, that they used to have, and folks ain't scared no more. That's why the generation coming behind us, they're not scared anymore. They're not scared of, anything at this point. Go ahead, Dr. Rue, I see you.
Well, it's like, I've been in the civil rights movement since the 60s. I knew Dr. King. I went door to door to raise money for him. And I knew, in looking back over and reading books about that time, I knew the change happened when Black people said, I'm not afraid anymore. What they had over us was fear of being killed, fear of being beaten, fears, and realistic fears. But when you stood up, we stood up and we said, but you can't scare me anymore. I'm not afraid. I'm going to stand up for my rights. I'm going to stand up for my sister's rights, my brother's rights, my children's rights. The future is dependent on me standing up. And I don't care what you do to me. Martin Luther King, to be in the audience with him, and he said, he had us so worked up. We were ready to walk out of the church and be killed, and we didn't care. He had to bring us down because he got us so excited about freedom, the whole concept, the taste of freedom, the idea that it could be ours, and we could work for it now for our children. It was a powerful thing.
I think that's so interesting, and especially when, I know that one of the things that's been that folks have been kind of hard pressed in the Black community, especially, baby boomer and Generation X, is that there is no longer this quote unquote leader, right, among us that is kind of carrying the torch for all of us. I think that, some of what we've seen happen through the work of the Movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter across the country is that, it's just the looking back and noticing that anytime we identified a leader that leader was murdered.
Right.
And folks aren't so willing to die for this anymore. And maybe that some of that comes from, maybe, I don't know, it could be judgment of folks' humanity who had to lead these charges, because none of the people who had the microphone, if you will, to lead were perfect people. None of them were perfect. Dr. King, Medgar Evers, Stokely Carmichael. I mean, we can go on. It doesn't. And none of these people were perfect people, but they were willing to take on this mantle of leadership to push it forward. Are we going to be able to figure out how to move this work forward without a point person? Are we going to be able to really think about how, everybody, I think the better question is, why is it that we think it's one person's job to lead? We all have a job to lead. That's something I've been saying even here in the workplace with you all in our team. Everybody has a responsibility to lead. And just kind of thinking about, and I'm gonna come over here on my phone because the internet in the office is just acting so retarded. But what is that about to mean for us? Or what does that mean for us? Do we feel like we don't have the proper movement to move this thing forward for ourselves because, and I'm gonna just cancel this out. Elise is not gonna come back up. I'm just gonna stay on here for the remainder. But do we think that we don't have the proper tools because we have not identified our new king or our new Malcolm X or our new whomever is gonna be? Do we think that we don't have the responsibility to move our connected liberation through our individual investment and leadership forward because we don't have, this particular person or do we, because I feel like there's like a call to action, like, Dr. King was clearly able to galvanize all of you because you were sold out to the belief system that you could be free, that you deserved your access to your human rights. You deserve to be able to vote. You deserve to be able to have a living wage. You deserved, these different things. I mean, are we going to be able to move the needle? Because we are being mollywopped by the other side of this conversation, who believes that they are right and they move in their righteous indignation, right? As if they are right. Right. So, when I think about like a call to action, how do we get folks to show up? And everybody who watches this may not be a person of faith. Like, how do we get, our brother, our sister, our neighbor to show up, right, for the next person, for ourselves even, with the understanding that, because I'm like, where did some of this breakdown happen? Did we just stop trusting each other? Did somebody need more credit? Was it not okay that certain people had the microphone and were carrying the charge? Like we've got to interrogate both sides of this. We can't just, put a spotlight on the other side of this conversation like they are so harmful, and we don't understand in the ways in which we are complicit with the same type of harm, even if it is at a micro level. Maybe it's, maybe we don't have Congress, or maybe we don't have the House, or maybe we don't, or maybe we do. But what are we doing with the power that we have? And how are we? I just don't know. I mean, like, how are we mobilizing folks?
Well, that's what we're grappling with right now. Some people call this the muddy middle, where we've come so far and we're kind of stuck, and our shoes are stuck. We're trying to get our shoes up and trying to find out where to go next. But we have to go on.
Yeah.
There has to be progress. We have to do, because we can't give up too many people. Our ancestors sacrificed too much for us to say, we're just going to stay here stuck in the muddy middle. We're going to get out of that muddy middle and go on. But it is what we're grappling with right now, and it's hard.
And each new generation is like, I'm gonna be the next generation, because y'all's generation didn't do it. Just for them to realize that they still end up in the muddy middle, because we don't do this without intergenerational connection.
Right.
You
Right.
know, we don't do
Right.
this without your generation, Doc. We don't do this without our children's generation. We don't do this. We don't progress.
And it was
But
funny. I was in
think
a
it's
meeting
what
with
you
some
said.
teenage activists, and they were frustrated because we hadn't gotten everything we wanted yet. I said, "Oh, this is a lifelong struggle. You're not going to get it because you turned 20."
Right. Well, and the other thing is this: look at the, and I'm a person of the LGBT community, but look at how fast the LGBT community was able to organize and get some of the things. Now, I know it didn't happen overnight, right? But I'm suggesting that in comparison to the different types of oppression that Black and brown people continue to experience, that we still don't have the right to walk down the street without, being pulled over in many cases, or drive down the street, and I'm saying that because my son used to jog in our community. That was a mixed community. I mean, it was a lot of different people that lived there, a lot of different races and ethnic backgrounds that lived there. But he was the only one that would get pulled over jogging down the street, right? So the point that I'm making is that many people would try to suggest that. First of all, let me deal with the first point of what you mentioned earlier, Cherisse. I think what you just said is very prophetic. I think this is a moment of the waking of the giants. I think that we cannot have one face leading the march, right? We've seen what they've done to the one face, what you mentioned earlier. And so now there are people who literally are called in this moment to organize and be activated to lead. They've been ordained and called to lead, and those folks are afraid to lead because of the history, that they do teach us around Black folks. And we weren't really taught or educated around all the contributions that Black folks made to science, right? But we were taught about the civil rights leaders who were murdered when we were in school. We were taught about how we had to sit in the back of the bus. Like, they were proud to teach us those things. And so now we're in the moment where I believe that, yes, those things happened to the multiple Black leaders who were leading it. And so, what do you do when that is a thing of the past? You change, right, the way in which you strategize moving forward, which I believe that there are sleeping giants who are afraid to answer the call because of what we have been taught. But this is the moment. If there's never been a moment that the sleeping giants, the kings and queens who are called, and others in between, who are called in this moment to answer, right? To answer to the injustices, to answer to the systematic oppression. Like, we have got to step forward. One of the things that just the images that just moved through my mind was, though Dr. King was leading or a leader of the civil rights movement, anytime you saw them marching, they were side by side locking arms, right? So yes, there may be someone that may be, that may be a leader, or may be thought to be a leader of the entire movement that has to happen, but they're still side by side. They're still working side by side. So again, I look at the LGBT community's movement. There hasn't been one person, right? One individual that's been pointed out to say, well, this is the person who led the LGBT movement or is leading the LGBT. There isn't one person. And so, yes, we can simultaneously do the work, and at all of its intersections, right, of justice, we can do the work. The other thing is, I believe, right? I believe, this is my belief, that when it comes to certain issues, that those who label themselves liberal but are not of the Black and brown communities, you have to be willing to allow us to lead. Things that are beneficial or crucial for our community, let us inform, what that should look like. Let us help inform or lead the strategies around that. And I think you mentioned something, Doc. I like the way that I believe it's Reverend Earl, who says, for folks, who are kind of teeter-tottering on one side and they're not really sure where they stand, Reverend Earl says, pick a side. Pick a side and stay there, right? And you know, do the things that are intricate to the movement of the side that you pick, right? And so, yeah, again, you know, I don't think it's a one name. We cannot expect the movement to continue with one person or one name leading any intersection of justice, right? It has to be a collective effort. It has to be multiracial. It has to be multi-ethnic. You know, that is the only way. Again, going back to the love element, that is the only way that we're going to be able to move forward and actually see the process, right? The process as well as the progress. You know, I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to see and experience the progress in our lifetime, which is we all lead, right? We all come out of fear. You know, we all come out of the doubt of what it, you know, or what we perceive what we perceive may not happen, right? We have to speak those things and live those things and create those things that are not and make them live, right? Because we have the authority to do that. So yeah, I think where we go from here, it's all of us leading. And for those who may not be as strong as others, it's the strong person taking that person by the hand and bringing them along with us, right? So yeah, I think again that in this moment there are giants, there are sleeping giants who may be afraid, right? But this is the moment, this is the time to activate, right? To activate the movement that is going to cause change, because we have generations coming behind us, and we have to act responsibly, right? And answer the call that's right in front of us in this moment.
It's about establishing and reinforcing the beloved community. And that's what we have to wake up every day and say, what can we do to make this a more beloved community, and understand what Dr. King meant when he said beloved community, what we mean, the whole global idea of it, the heart space of it, what it can mean for the future, what is about the beloved community, establishing it, making it firm, making people understand what it is, and making it real.
Which for me, you know, what comes up for me, I posted something this morning, just kind of thinking about, there's a Black trans woman-led organization here in the city who's been doing some really phenomenal work to create housing opportunities for Black women of trans experience here. And it really prompted me to, and the sister made a comment on her own page, basically like, if every one of the nonprofits here would basically put the resources up to get one basically housing space for, you know, for trans women, then the project would be over. Everybody would be okay, you know. And that kind of prompted me to say to the folks who follow me on my Facebook page who are white, whether they be funders, whether they be clergy, whether they be corporations, business owners, whomever, philanthropists, whomever, that it's time for white people to leverage their privilege in service to the liberation of people of color.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's what came up for me. That's what comes up for me when we were thinking about, like, what is this common denominator, right? You know, what needs to be this? And I'm not saying that whiteness can cure all of the ills of our people. I'm saying leveraging white privilege, leveraging white money, you know, white power, white influence, white political power, white media power. And this isn't necessarily something that we're supposed to leverage. It's those who love to call themselves allies need to be thinking about, you know, and even when I think about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, religious liberties, and how that kind of operates in the world, you know, we were able to move same-sex marriage before we were able to get to a better cure, or get to a cure for HIV.
Right.
You know, we've been able to do, it seems that when white people are involved, we are able to move the needle to human rights so much quicker, right, than when we are working in silo alone. And when I say silo, you know, whether it's our respective, you know, racial construct, or if it is together in service to liberation for people, people of color across this globe. It just always seems like, where there is this level of money and influence, things can move so much faster. So then it poses for me a question. Is everybody complicit in the oppression of Black and brown people? Right?
Yes.
When I stood on that stage and said my little few minutes of words to say, I was who's benefiting? Who benefits from Black women and girls having babies? Who's benefiting actually from Black women and girls having abortions? Who is benefiting from Black women dying on the table during labor and delivery? Who is benefiting from, because we got to keep this money wheel turning, but who is actually benefiting? Right? If I think about my own movement, when it comes down to reproductive health, reproductive rights, and reproductive justice, which are 3 movements, not one. Reproductive justice is the least funded, but everybody's utilizing reproductive justice to forward their work.
Right.
Yes.
Who is benefiting from our oppression, right? And then this common denominator seems to need to be not only identified, but called in about how we then move the needle for everybody to eat, for everybody to have a roof over their head, for everybody to have a budget where there's 401k, medical insurance, paid time off, and a check. I mean, come on, everybody's gonna have to do it. So going back to what you said around Dr. King's reasoning for talking about the beloved community, to establish and reinforce it, right, for everybody to benefit from it, not just men, not just white men, not just white communities, white people, but for all of us to be able to benefit from it.
Right.
Go ahead, Doc. I think you're about to say something.
No, I was just agreeing with you loudly.
It's hardcore, So it's as I'm kind of, this going into my 18th year, which means what? I'm becoming an adult at RJ now. That my work is growing to this adult level now, this intermediate. I don't know, but I'm not a comedian. Okay, probably was funny, but I'm just saying, like, looking back, almost 18 years. It's been the same thing. We've been circling around the same. And now as I come upon this 18th year of doing this work, is the things that this work been fighting for is the most vulnerable it has ever been. It's ever been. Right? With this much, with these many advances in technology and these many advances with people, who look like us in, who are elected officials, right? But, across generations, we got millennials and some zennials, holding these elected seats, right? I mean, so when I think about where do we go from here, it seems like we're going to have to kind of do some level of looking back to clean up some problems before we can truly move forward. We still have to stay the course toward liberation, but it can't be business as usual. It can't be the strategy as usual. What I mean? It cannot be, the tools, those tools no longer are serving us in the ways that they once were. That staying the course, that thinking where do we go from here means that we're going to have to become uncomfortable again. Right. That it may be time to pass the microphone for real this time to people of color. Right. And not just the mic, but the money to people of color.
The mic and the money.
Right. The mic and the money.
And the money.
While and that doesn't mean that there is no room or space for progressive white people. Right. That means that you just reposition where you are. Yes. That means now you become the force that helps to push. You're not the lead, because that hasn't served us. That hasn't. We haven't. You know what I mean? Yes, it has helped to band-aid abortion access. It has helped to band-aid not putting people in prison for teaching comprehensive sex education. It has helped to band-aid
immigration reform, but it's not been enough to correct it. In either of these instances, we are still here. So, it just seems like there's a amazing opportunity for us to really, something that I said to the staff, 2019 coming into 2020, that is starting to really kind of roll out into fruition. I used 3 words to tell them like what I felt was on my heart, what was definitely inspired by the divine in my meditation, in my prayer time about where Sister Reach will go. And we're seeing it happening now internally, in real time, which was to realign, redefine, and reimagine. It is time to realign, whatever we call ourselves doing to human rights very specifically, very intentionally, deeply with commitment. It is time to redefine who is the best to serve, to do the work, who's the best to lead, who's the best to carry the message, right? And that doesn't say that they're just left out there to chance, but they're prepared, right? Because there are some tools and some strategies and some, that our white counterparts can teach that are very important for us to be able to take with us along this path, right? Towards this better life for everyone. But that is also reimagine. Can we reimagine a conversation that doesn't center so heavily on abortion and it focuses more broadly on the holistic lives of people? Can we reimagine, work that's not just about the Hyde Amendment, the Helms Amendment, SB 8? Can we really think of, is our philanthropic community willing to support holistic work in service to that same thing, right? What is the commitment that those who have the purse, like those who can inspire those with the purse, what is their commitment? And then something I was talking to, I don't know, it might be you at least, I'm gonna need to see white folks get out here and educate and mobilize around doing some get out the vote with white people.
Yes.
Look,
yes.
I'm not saying we don't need your voter engagement money, right? Because we do. Because
Absolutely.
our people are totally turned off from them having being treated fairly at the polls. Our people are quickly becoming turned off. But I mean, by that same token, what I have not seen the entire time of these 17 years of me doing this work is white folks doing voter engagement among white people.
Yeah.
For reproductive health or rights.
Yeah.
I'm just not seeing that. So it's time for everybody to roll up your sleeves. That the revolution, it will not be won behind a keyboard on Facebook.
Right.
The revolution will not be on a listserv.
Right. It won't be behind good intent.
You see what I'm saying? It's just not going to happen that way. That it's got to be, and some of those things, some of those strategies that we turned our noses up to, right? Some of those, things, some of those strategies that we saw those early freedom fighters, doing and lifting up, and everybody had a role, and you prepare the message while you fry the chicken, while you get the postage stamps and you fold the paper. Like we got to go back to the basics here, because I think that we've gotten out of, we've just put certain strategies and tools out to pasture. And we've lost something. So we've got to be able to realign, redefine, reimagine. That's how we're going to go from here. We've got to be able to start over. You know what I mean? We got to be able to start fresh.
One of the things I like that you asked earlier was who is benefiting from our oppression, right? Yeah. And follow the money trail, follow the power trail. And in order for us to be able to move progressively on issues, those who have power and the money are going to have to be willing to relinquish it, right? They have to, right? They have to be willing to give, a degree of power, to give larger amounts of money, because, during the movement of Black Lives, there were corporations. You would see Black Lives Matter all over their websites. You would see it. They were nearly chasing Black people, right, to say that we care. And then a lot of these same, folks who hold the money got very quiet, right? And things went silent again. And maybe because, certain things happen politically, maybe because we have a new administration, maybe they assumed that the battle was over, but the battle's never been over. I mean, look at the way that things are happening, as you mentioned earlier, even around abortion. So absolutely redefining, what it looks like moving forward. Who's holding the bag, as the young folks say. Where we don't continue having to chase the bag, right? When there are folks that are standing there holding it, who could very, like, in a day's time, in a moment's time, write a check to solve a whole lot of people's problems. One of the things that my pastor, when I was growing up in church, used to say is, when you see a person who's really sad, like, I'm not talking about those that may experience mental health issues and things like that, but when you see folks who are really sad, give them some money and watch their demeanor and countenance change, right? But those holding the money are able to do that. Those holding the money are able to assist the folks that are being put out of Pepper Tree Apartments. Those holding the money are able to give access to good and great health care to everybody. Those holding the money are able to say that we're going to continue allowing those with, these insurmountable student loans to have forgiveness for now. You're able to say that, right? But via what I read yesterday, right, now they're not saying that, right? They're saying everybody's going back to, let's go back to paying in the midst of a pandemic. Everybody's going to go back to paying student loans in the midst of a pandemic with a new variant, right, in our country, in our city at this point. And so I agree, redefine, reimagine, realign, like, what does that look like for those who are holding the bag to do that, right? Because we don't have a problem doing it. Those who need it, we don't have a problem doing any of the three. But what does that mean to the folks who are holding the power? So my challenge, my call to action are for the corporations, those who are holding the bag, who basically during the movement for Black Lives, when folks were throwing money, right? Those who have gotten quiet, those who thought that our issues were solved through a new administration, that's federal. We're still on a local level dealing with homelessness, and everyday things. And so, yeah, my challenge would be in this moment for those who are holding the bag to relinquish it and to do more, because more has to be done, not because there's anybody in marginalized communities who are greedy. That's not greed when you have a need and you're asking somebody for help. Yes, Jesus said the poor you'll have with you always, but that's because of the systems that were created, right? to keep folks poor. So yeah, redefine, realign, reimagine for the folks who are holding the bag.
Any last words you have, Doc, before we close out this evening?
No, it's, having been doing this for really over 50 years, you can get discouraged, you can get tired. I go to the old gospel songs where they sang about their weariness, their tiredness, the spirituals. I think of those songs, the words of people who were free, people who were in chains, and what they sang and talked about and what they thought for the future. That's part of the ballast of my life, to think about what they went through, the spirituals, the words they came up with. And it helps gets me through.
Yeah, indeed. We have any comments or anything, Elise, in the chat on Facebook?
There were a few as we went, when we were talking about basically patriarchy. Joy says, I spent 2 hours yesterday trying to help a woman understand that being in a safe space is her human right, because she has been harmed by some members of church and social service providers to believe differently. She says, and be out here with us regularly in regards to the those who are running for offices, and be out here with us regularly and honestly, right? That's the word I love, integrally, before you make your announcement to run for anything. And
That's
so another comment is G. Mallory says, when some people understand the need to stand up, they will. And then there are others of us who are comfortable in complacency. So I think both those are calls to action. For those who are complacent, and just, have gotten settled and comfortable in the state that we're in, we are not okay. We are not okay, and it's time to activate.
Yeah, and I appreciate all of those comments. I encourage us to look beyond ourselves. Many of us are trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do with my life? Why am I here? What is my purpose? I would offer that your purpose is wrapped up in making sure that I'm free. Your purpose is wrapped up in whether or not your neighbor has a hot meal. Your purpose is wrapped up in making sure that every person that comes in through the emergency room, when they lay on your operating table, that you've done your best, your absolute best. If they were Black, if they were white, if they were gay, if they were straight, if they were disabled, we have a greater responsibility to care for humankind, and as we think about what our responsibility, where we go from here, we can't go from here with selfish thinking any longer. We can't go from here being self-centered and only thinking of self. Honey, look, I'll never be the one to say that you don't need to take care of yourself. What do they tell you on the plane? Cover your face with the mask and then help the person sitting next to you. Yes, you got to make sure that you can breathe, right? But there's a difference between breathing and then being able to help someone, or breathing and you have gotten off the plane and you had already made it to the baggage claim and you were in the car like, oh man, I should have thought about the. Yeah, I mean, like just being mindful of one another. It's time for us to be mindful of one another. Like we've just never done that before. Folks were super hard pressed just to put a mask on because they felt like, oh my God, we're all tired of wearing them. Let's be clear, we're all tired of wearing them, okay?
Right.
But because we care about the next person is why we keep them on, because we can't see this virus in the air. We don't know which surface it's still lingering on. We're trying to take care of ourselves and we're trying to take care of other people, So, I mean, I don't have, anything deep and wonderful per se beyond what I feel so many wonderful comments that have come out of our discussion today. But I encourage you, right, to change your posture in this thought process. Change your posture. This kind of scenario was told in a sermon that I heard one time from one of my mentors in the ministry. And he was basically saying, when you're going to get over to get into the other lane, sometimes you can see with your side view or your rear view mirror. But in order for you to make, a move that won't harm anybody, in order for you to change lanes and to get to your destination, sometimes you physically, literally need to inconvenience yourself and change your posture. So we got to change our posture right now. Right? It's time to change our mindset. It's time to check our, even to some kind of, in some ways, even, the ways that our fatigue. I mean, Dr. Ruth said she's been doing this for over 50 years. I ain't been in the world over 50 years, which means I've got some more work to do. And I can't just be like, I'm throwing in the towel at the very least until I've at least given this thing 50. I don't know, Doc. I don't know. But I mean, and everybody has like their stopping point, but then there is a responsibility, there is a call, right, on all of our lives to care for ourselves, to care for our neighbor. So we invite you to do that. What you will see coming from Sister Reach in the new year is more of how we care for someone other than ourselves. What you will see from Sister Reach, how we have always operated for these 10 years, is centering those whose voices are not heard, whose liberty is in jeopardy, right? Whose voices have been totally ignored. This is how we've always operated since the founding of this organization. And that's what we will continue to do. We think that that is our that's a part of how we're supposed to operate in the world. That's how we do this work as nonprofits. Nonprofits that aren't investing in community and showing up in time and talent and in treasure. I'm not sure that they're nonprofits. They're just kind of for-profits in nonprofit clothing. But because it is time to figure out the best ways that we help those who cannot help themselves or are hindered from helping themselves. And so we thank you for rocking with us in 2021. We look forward to continuing this social justice preacher series in 2022. Your host for that, to help facilitate those discussions, is going to be none other than the amazing Dr. Sylvia Rue, who is on with us today and who has been a contributor to this series over the last year or so, almost 2 years, right?
Can I make one correction? One correction.
You've been doing stuff, right?
One correction. I haven't been doing this 50 years. I count 60 years.
Come on, 60.
60 years, yeah.
Come on, 60, right?
From the 60s.
And 2 years with Sister Reach, right? That you've been, helping us get to the next level, right? And so we're so glad to have you on the staff, on this amazing team. We ask that you continue to follow Sister Reach, share this video, because we didn't cover everything we may have wanted to cover. This was far more freestyle discussion for us to just consider all that we have experienced this year and what we will experience next year. But we look forward to, down in the chat, leave us some comments about things that you'd like us to talk about next year. As Doc seeks out speakers, we'll be taking all of that into consideration for next year about, some of the topics that we will be encountering, and then hopefully we will be able to pull off this faith and advocacy conference, faith advocacy and religion conference here in Memphis, Tennessee. In the fall, where we would love for those of you to come to that, to offer your workshops that you'd like to talk about. Like, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from folks who are sitting in the pews, not just those of you with minister, reverend, deacon, evangelist, or prophetess in front of your name. We want to hear from everyday people, right? Everyday people who are navigating their religious lives and even their non-religious lives. We want to hear from atheists. We want to hear from everybody who is impacted by this political climate. Yes. And we not only want to hear from you, we want you to be involved in this work. So we thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you so much for supporting Reverend Elise, as she has led this for over the almost 2 years now. We thank you for your hard work, Elise, and we hope that, as you continue to spread your wings and your own faith endeavors outside of Sister Reach with your church and the things that you're a part of, that you continue to thrive. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys next month. Who's up for next month? Do we already have our person?
Yes, Reverend Cheryl Ward.
We're going to have Reverend Cheryl Ward next month. And what is she going to be talking about?
I don't know her topic yet, but she has Cheryl Ward Ministries. She has a major outreach to youth. She has a passion for youth, and she'll pick her topic. It'll be amazing. She's just really good.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to seeing Reverend Cheryl Ward next month, and stay tuned, because that flyer, I'm sure, will be coming out no later than the top of the month in the new year. And we hope to see you all here. Have a beautiful day. Love, light, and liberation. And thank you so much for supporting Sister Reach. Peace out.
Okay.